The day I overheard my daughter Melissa tell her husband that I was financially incompetent was the day I decided to stop being the sweet, accommodating mother they thought they knew. For 35 years, I'd given Melissa everything: my time, my savings, my unconditional support. I'd built an international consulting career while raising her alone after her father died. I'd paid for private schools, Ivy League tuition, and even the down payment on her first home. Now, at 61, I was allegedly incapable of managing my own money. Little did she know that the modest retirement account she was so eager to protect was just the tip of a very substantial iceberg. An iceberg with significant portions hidden in places she would never think to look. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I never planned to be the kind of mother who keeps secrets from her child. When David died of a heart attack while Melissa was just 5 years old, I promised myself I would be both parents to her, honest, loving, and entirely devoted. In many ways, I kept that promise. I built my international business consulting practice around a schedule that allowed me to attend her soccer games and dance recitals. I postponed business trips to Asia when she had the flu. I sat up with her, through teenage heartbreaks, and celebrated her accomplishments as if they were my own. Seattle was the perfect place to raise her: safe neighborhoods, excellent schools, and a thriving business community that kept my consulting practice growing steadily. Our Laurelhurst home wasn't extravagant, but it was comfortable, with a small dock where we would sit together on summer evenings, dipping our toes in Lake Washington while sharing ice cream cones. Those were simple, perfect moments. I thought, we understood each other. I believed we had something special. Perhaps that's why the betrayal cut so deeply. The real trouble began 3 years ago, shortly after my 61st birthday. I'd decided it was finally time to slow down, to accept fewer clients and enjoy the life I'd worked so hard to build. My retirement accounts were healthy enough, or so everyone thought, and I'd always lived well within my means. The first signs of Melissa's concern seemed innocent enough. "Mom, did you update your will after selling the Houston project?" she asked over brunch one Sunday. Melissa had followed my footsteps into finance, becoming a certified financial advisor at a prestigious Seattle firm. She looked so much like her father, same sharp blue eyes, same determined chin. But her approach to money was entirely my influence, or so I thought. "It's on my to-do list," I said, pouring more coffee. "Rick's handling it." Rick Cooper had been my attorney for decades, a trusted friend who knew more about my financial situation than anyone, even Melissa. "Rick's getting older, Mom. His practice is scaling back. Kevin and I were thinking maybe you should consider someone more current." Kevin, my son-in-law of 7 years, nodded from across the table while feeding their 8-year-old son Tyler another pancake. "My firm works with some excellent estate attorneys, very up-to-date on the latest tax strategies." I smiled and changed the subject. It seemed like genuine concern, and perhaps it was, initially. The suggestions continued, gradually increasing in frequency and urgency. They wanted me to consolidate my accounts with Melissa's firm. They thought I should downsize from my lake house to a retirement community. They worried about my impulse decision to open a small art gallery featuring local artists, a longtime dream I'd finally pursued. "It's not exactly a high-return investment, Mom," Melissa said when she visited the gallery shortly after its opening. I watched her eyes sweep critically over the space I'd lovingly renovated, dismissing the paintings and sculptures I'd carefully curated. "Not everything in life is about maximizing returns, Melissa," I replied. "Some things are about joy." She gave me that look, the one that said I was being naive. David used to call it my dreamer's defense. The difference was, he'd said it with affection. In Melissa's eyes, I saw only judgment. The turning point came last April. I'd been fighting a nasty spring cold, and Melissa had stopped by with homemade soup, or rather soup from the organic market near her downtown condo, repackaged in her containers, a trick she thought I didn't notice. I was resting in the sunroom when I heard her answering my phone in the kitchen. "Mrs. Jensen's residence," she said, her voice switching to the professional tone she used with clients. "No, she can't come to the phone right now. This is her daughter, Melissa Williams. I handle her financial affairs." I sat up, suddenly alert despite my stuffed sinuses. I handle her financial affairs? Since when? What followed was a conversation with someone from my bank about a transfer I'd initiated to my gallery's business account. Melissa was questioning it, saying it seemed excessive, and asking for details about the transaction history. I should have confronted her immediately. Instead, I listened, shock keeping me silent as my own daughter effectively impersonated me to a financial institution. When she hung up, I quickly lay back down, pretending to be asleep when she checked on me. That night, I couldn't rest. I kept replaying all the little moments of concern, the suggestions, the offers of help. Had I missed something? Was I truly showing signs of decline that warranted this level of intervention? I reviewed mental spreadsheets of my recent decisions, searching for evidence of incompetence. There was none. My gallery was breaking even after just 6 months. Impressive for a new arts business. My investment portfolio was conservatively, but effectively managed. I'd made no erratic purchases, missed no bill payments. My mind was sharp, my judgment sound. The next morning, I called Rick from my car. "Barbara, perfect timing. I was about to call you," he said, his voice carrying the slight rasp of a former smoker. "Did you authorize Melissa to request copies of your estate documents?" She called yesterday. My stomach tightened. "No, Rick, I didn't." The silence on the line spoke volumes. Rick had known me through my divorce from my first husband before David, through David's death, through raising Melissa alone. He understood, immediately. "I didn't release anything," he said quietly. "Client confidentiality still means something to dinosaurs like me." "Thank you," I whispered, pulling into a viewpoint overlooking Puget Sound. "Rick, I need to know exactly what I've shared with Melissa about my finances and what I haven't." What followed was a thorough inventory of my financial disclosures. My Seattle property, my declared investment accounts, my gallery's business structure, my official retirement funds. What wasn't on that list, what Melissa had no knowledge of, were the results of 20 years of international consulting across Asia. Multiple accounts in Singapore, established when I helped several tech firms expand into American markets. A trust in the Cayman Islands, created during my 4-year contract with a shipping conglomerate. Various investments managed through a holding company in Luxembourg, structured by an astute client who'd insisted on compensating me partly in stock options that had multiplied tenfold. These weren't tax evasions. I'd always worked with Rick to ensure everything was properly reported. They were simply diversified international assets that I'd never had reason to consolidate or mention to Melissa. My daughter knew I'd been successful, but I'd always been private about exactly how successful. David and I had both come from humble backgrounds, and we'd wanted Melissa to value work rather than wealth. Now that privacy seemed providential. "What are you thinking, Barbara?" Rick asked after I'd been silent too long. "I'm thinking it's time for a contingency plan," I replied, watching a ferry cut through the steel-gray waters of the Sound. "How quickly can we secure those offshore assets?" "They're already secure," Rick assured me. "The question is, what are you planning to do about Melissa?" What indeed? The daughter I'd raised, the child I'd loved unconditionally, was now trying to wrest control of my life under the guise of protection. The betrayal stung in ways I couldn't articulate, even to Rick. "I'm going to wait," I said finally. "And watch. I need to understand how far she's willing to go." I didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, Melissa and Kevin invited me to dinner at their downtown condo. Tyler was at a sleepover, so it was just the three of us. Always a warning sign. The moment Kevin poured my favorite wine, a Willamette Valley Pinot Noir they normally considered too expensive for regular dinners, I knew an ambush was coming. "Mom," Melissa began after an elaborate salmon dish that she definitely hadn't cooked herself, "we need to talk about your long-term care plans." I took a deliberate sip of wine. "What about them?" "Well, you're at an age where you need to think about the future," Kevin jumped in, all solicitous concern. "Healthcare costs, potential assisted living." "I have excellent health insurance and long-term care coverage," I replied calmly. "It's all arranged." Melissa exchanged a glance with Kevin. "The thing is, Mom, we've been reviewing your finances." "You've been what?" I kept my voice level, though my hand tightened around the stem of my wine glass. "Just looking out for you," she hastened to add. "And the numbers don't quite work. The gallery is draining resources. Your property taxes are astronomical, and there's this strange pattern of withdrawals." "Strange pattern of withdrawals," I repeated, setting down my glass. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "From my accounts, that you've been reviewing without my knowledge or permission." Kevin cleared his throat. "Melissa has access as an authorized user on your Bank of America accounts. She's just doing her due diligence as your daughter." I remembered adding Melissa to one checking account years ago when I was traveling frequently in Asia in case of emergencies. I'd never authorized her to monitor all my finances. "I see," I said, my mind racing. "And what conclusions have you drawn from this due diligence?" Melissa reached across the table to take my hand, her expression a perfect mask of daughterly concern. "Mom, we think it's time to simplify everything. We've prepared some paperwork to consolidate your accounts under my firm's management. We can sell the gallery. Kevin knows someone who might take it as a tax write-off. And we should probably list the lake house soon. The market's still strong, and what would happen to me in this scenario?" I interrupted, pulling my hand away. "We found the most amazing retirement community in Bellevue," Kevin said enthusiastically. "Like a luxury resort. You'd have your own apartment, but with healthcare staff right there if needed." "I don't need healthcare staff," I said, feeling a chill despite the perfectly regulated temperature of their condo. "I'm in excellent health." Melissa's expression softened into something that looked disturbingly like pity. "Mom, you forgot Tyler's birthday last month." "I was in Portland looking at artwork for the gallery. I called him that evening, and his present arrived the next day." "You've been making calculation errors in your checkbook," she continued. "I use online banking almost exclusively now." "The gallery rent was paid late twice, because the building's new management company changed the payment system and didn't properly notify tenants. Every shop in the building had the same issue. For every example they presented of my supposed decline, I had a rational explanation. Yet I could see in their eyes that nothing I said mattered. They had constructed a narrative of my incompetence, and every defense I offered was simply evidence of my denial. The paperwork they wanted me to sign was comprehensive. Power of attorney, healthcare directive, financial management authorization, all giving Melissa full control. When I refused, the concern in their eyes hardened into something else. "Mom, be reasonable," Melissa said, her voice taking on the edge it got when she was losing patience. "This is for your own protection." "I don't need protection from myself," I replied, standing up. "Thank you for dinner. I think I should go now." Kevin tried to insist on driving me home, but I called a car service from my phone before he could stop me. As I waited in their lobby, I made a decision. I needed to understand exactly how far they'd already gone and what they were planning. Next. The next morning, I contacted Diana Martinez, my former colleague who still worked in international consulting. We'd stayed friends over the years, meeting for lunch whenever she was in Seattle. "Barbara, what a lovely surprise. she said when we met at a quiet cafe far from both my home and Melissa's office. "You sounded mysterious on the phone." "I need a favor, Diana," I said after we'd ordered. "A professional consultation, off the record." She raised an eyebrow but nodded. Diana and I had worked through enough delicate business situations together to have developed absolute trust. "I need to know if someone has been investigating my finances. Not my American accounts. I already know about those, but my international holdings." Diana's expression grew serious. "You think you're being targeted?" "By my daughter," I said, the words still painful to speak aloud. Over the next hour, I explained the situation. Diana listened without interruption, her dark eyes occasionally widening but her face otherwise impassive. The same professional mask we'd both perfected during difficult negotiations. "I have contacts who can run a discreet check," she said finally. "It won't be traced back to you." 3 days later, Diana confirmed what I'd suspected. Someone had been making inquiries about me with several financial institutions in Singapore. They hadn't gotten far. Those banks valued privacy above all else. But the attempts had been made. The IP addresses traced back to Melissa's firm. My daughter wasn't just looking to control my declared assets. She was hunting for everything. I spent the next week in a fog of betrayal and disbelief, going through the motions at the gallery while my mind worked through possibilities. I could confront Melissa directly, but what would that accomplish? She clearly believed she was entitled to this information, entitled to take control for my own good. Another part of me, a part I wasn't proud of, wanted to teach her a lesson she wouldn't forget. In the end, I chose a third path. If Melissa wanted control so badly, I would give it to her, but only of what she could see. The visible tip of my financial iceberg. With Rick's help, I began restructuring. We transferred most assets from my American accounts to a trust that would benefit Tyler's education, with Melissa as trustee. The lake house, which she was so eager to sell, was put in a separate trust with strict conditions about its use and sale. On paper, it appeared I was acquiescing to her concerns while protecting my legacy for my grandson. In reality, I was executing a strategic retreat. My offshore accounts remained untouched, their existence still unknown to her. I maintained just enough liquid assets in Seattle to live comfortably, while giving the impression that the lake house and gallery represented the bulk of my worth. The transformation in Melissa when I presented this plan was remarkable. Her relief that I was finally being sensible was palpable. She hugged me, tears in her eyes, telling me I was doing the right thing for everyone. Kevin praised my wisdom and foresight. They began talking about the lake house renovations they might undertake before selling. I smiled through it all, playing the role of the compliant mother who had finally seen reason. Inside, I was already planning my next move. The art gallery turned out to be my perfect cover. I began taking more frequent trips to Portland, ostensibly to meet artists and attend shows. In reality, I was laying groundwork. I found a charming waterfront cottage in a quiet community outside the city, smaller than my Seattle home, but with a studio space flooded with northern light. Perfect for an artist, which I'd always wanted to be but never had time to pursue. Seriously. I paid cash through a holding company Diana helped me establish, keeping the purchase completely separate from any financial instruments Melissa monitored. Over the course of 6 months, I gradually moved personal items to the cottage. Family, photos, favorite books, the quilt David's mother had made for our wedding. Nothing valuable enough to be missed, but everything meaningful enough to make the space feel like home. All the while, I maintained the appearance of a woman resigned to her daughter's oversight. I accepted Melissa's weekly financial check-ins. I entertained the retirement community brochures Kevin kept bringing over. I even allowed them to hire a companion to help me 3 days a week, a sweet college student named Amber who was genuinely helpful at the gallery and who reported back to Melissa about my daily activities. "Your daughter really worries about you," Amber mentioned one afternoon as we were unpacking a new shipment of ceramics. That's her way of showing love, I replied, carefully lifting a delicate porcelain bowl from its packing. She's always been a bit of a control freak. Amber laughed. She calls every day after my shift. Always the same questions. Did you take your medications? Did you eat regular meals? Any visitors at the gallery? Did you seem confused about anything? I nearly dropped the bowl. She asks if I seem confused? Amber's cheeks flushed. I always say no. Because you don't. Ever. You're like the sharpest person I know. The confirmation of Melissa's surveillance hurt, but it also strengthened my resolve. The web of control she was weaving around me was tightening. It was time to act. My opportunity came 2 months later when Melissa and Kevin announced they were taking Tyler to Hawaii for spring break. 2 weeks at a luxury resort on Maui, a trip they suggested I might be too tired to join. You'll have Amber checking in, and we've arranged for meals to be delivered, Melissa assured me. Just focus on resting. That sounds perfect. I agreed. I could use the quiet time. The moment their flight took off, I began executing my carefully orchestrated plan. First, I called Amber and told her I'd be closing the gallery for the duration of their trip, with pay, of course, as I decided to visit an old friend in Vancouver. I then contacted the meal delivery service and redirected the deliveries to a women's shelter, paid through the end of the month. Next, I called Rick, who arrived at the lake house with the documents we'd prepared. Within hours, I'd signed everything. Needed to accomplish 2 key objectives. First, to place the gallery in the hands of my assistant manager, who'd been practically running it anyway. Second, to initiate the sale of the lake house to a buyer Rick had quietly arranged, a developer, who'd been eyeing the property for years. By evening, I'd packed my car with the last personal items I wanted to keep. Everything else would be sold with the house or donated. I took one final walk through the home where I'd raised Melissa, where we'd shared so many memories. In her old bedroom, I placed an envelope on the dresser, a letter explaining my decision, not apologizing for it, but acknowledging the pain it might cause. That night, I drove south toward Portland and my new life. As Seattle's lights faded in my rearview mirror, I felt an unexpected lightness. The betrayal still hurt. The loss of the relationship I thought I had with my daughter still ached like a phantom limb. But there was also relief and, surprisingly, excitement. My offshore accounts, the ones Melissa had tried and failed to locate, contained more than enough for me to live comfortably for the rest of my life and still leave a generous inheritance for Tyler through channels his parents couldn't access until he was 25. I had my health, my mind, and now, my freedom. Melissa called 17 times during their first day back from Hawaii. I didn't answer. The text messages ranged from confused to concerned to angry. Mom, where are you? The house looks empty. Are you okay? We're getting worried. The gallery manager says you've transferred ownership? What's going on? Mom, this isn't funny. Kevin's talking about calling the police. A real estate agent just called about the house. Tell me this is a mistake. The final message came 3 days later. I found your letter. I don't understand how you could do this. We were only trying to help you. Call me. I didn't call. Instead, I sent a brief email. Melissa, I'm safe and well. The decisions I've made are sound and legal. The gallery transfer ensures local artists still have a place to show their work. The house sale proceeds will be substantial. You and Kevin can discuss with the estate attorney how those funds will be managed within the trust we established. I've chosen to live somewhere new, somewhere I don't have to justify my decisions or defend my competence. I'll send a card for Tyler's birthday. Next month. Take care, Mom. She hired a private investigator, of course. I learned this through Rick, who continued to manage certain legal matters for me. The PI didn't get far. The Portland property was too well insulated, the offshore accounts impossible to trace. Eventually, The investigators' reports grew thin, and Melissa had to accept the reality. Her mother wasn't just competent, she had outmaneuvered her completely. 6 months into my new life, I received a letter forwarded through Rick's office. The handwriting on the envelope was Melissa's. "Mom," it began, "I still don't fully understand why you left the way you did. Kevin says you felt cornered and lashed out. Maybe that's true. Maybe we pushed too hard. What I do know is that Tyler misses his grandmother. He asks about you constantly. Whatever issues exist between us, please don't punish him. I've enclosed his school picture and his new address for his hockey team. If you could send him something directly, it would mean the world to him. Melissa." No apology, no acknowledgement of the attempted financial takeover, just an appeal through my grandson, the one pure relationship in this tangle of betrayal and control. I sat on my cottage's deck, watching boats navigate the Columbia River as I considered my response. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had evolved into something more nuanced. Melissa was still my daughter, still the child I had raised alone, still part of me in ways that couldn't be severed by betrayal or distance. Perhaps, in her mind, she had truly been trying to help. Perhaps fear, of aging parents, of role reversals, of mortality itself, had driven her actions rather than simple greed or control. Understanding didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped me contextualize it. I took out my phone and composed a text message, the first direct communication I'd initiated since leaving Seattle. "Tyler's hockey photo received. He has his grandfather's. Smile. I'll be at his game next Saturday, coming alone. Not ready to see you and Kevin yet. But it's a start." When I pressed send, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a willingness to consider it, on my terms. From a position of strength rather than vulnerability. My offshore accounts remained my secret, a safety net ensuring I would never again be at anyone's mercy financially. But perhaps there were other types of wealth worth risking again. The richness of family connections, the joy of watching my grandson grow, the possibility of rebuilding trust with my daughter. Not today, maybe not this year, but someday. For now, I had the sea breeze in my hair, paintbrushes waiting in my studio, and the freedom to make my own choices, good or bad, without justification or defense. At 61, I'd started over completely, and somehow, against all expectations, I was thriving. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in what you hold on to, but in what you're willing to release. I'd released the need for Melissa's approval. I'd released the lakefront house that had become more prison than home. I'd released the obligation to make myself small to accommodate others' need for control. What I kept was my dignity, my independence, and the offshore accounts that made it all possible. Perhaps not the legacy I'd imagined leaving my daughter, but exactly the one I needed for myself. The morning of Tyler's hockey game arrived with a blanket of fog over Portland. I woke before dawn, the familiar pre-travel anxiety tightening my chest despite the relatively short drive to Seattle. This would be my first time back in 6 months, my first face-to-face encounter with any part of my old life. I dressed carefully, cashmere sweater, well-tailored slacks, subtle jewelry, armor of a sort. The woman who would watch her grandson play hockey today was not the confused, declining mother Melissa had tried to portray. She was confident, composed, and very much in control of her faculties. The drive north gave me time to prepare mentally. I rehearsed potential scenarios, ready for anything from a tearful reunion to a public confrontation. I'd chosen the hockey game deliberately, a public setting where appearances would need to be maintained, where Tyler's happiness would be the priority for everyone. A strategic choice, like so many I'd made throughout my career. The rink was exactly as Tyler had described in the cheerful letter he'd sent after receiving my response. A renovated facility with gleaming ice and stands already filling with parents clutching travel mugs of coffee. I slipped in quietly, choosing a seat midway up the bleachers with a clear view of both the ice and the entrance. The cold air carried the familiar scent of rubber mats and the metallic tang of freshly groomed ice, triggering unexpected memories of early morning practices when Melissa was Tyler's age. I spotted him immediately. Number 83, his dark hair visible beneath his helmet as he warmed up with teammates. He'd grown at least an inch since I'd last seen him. His skating had improved remarkably, his movements more confident and controlled. Pride swelled in my chest, momentarily eclipsing my anxiety. Then I saw her. Melissa stood near the players' bench, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, eyes scanning the bleachers while Kevin chatted with another father. When her gaze found mine, she froze, color draining from her face. I offered a small, restrained wave. Acknowledgement. Without invitation. For a moment, she seemed genuinely stunned, as if she hadn't quite believed I would actually appear despite my message. She nudged Kevin, who looked up, spotted me, and frowned. They conferred briefly, heads bent together in familiar conspiracy, before Melissa slowly made her way toward the bleachers. She stopped at the row just below mine, her expression a carefully constructed mask of casual politeness, the same face she used for difficult clients. "You came," she said, stating the obvious. "Tyler will be excited." "That's why I'm here," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "He looks good on the ice." Melissa nodded, glancing back at her son. "He's improved a lot this season. The coach says he has natural talent." The awkward small talk continued as we danced around the elephant in the arena. "How are you?" "Fine. The drive wasn't bad. The new coach is excellent. Tyler's doing well in school." "He doesn't know you're coming," she finally said. "I didn't want to get his hopes up in case." "In case I proved unreliable?" I finished for her. "That would fit your narrative about me, wouldn't it?" Her cheeks flushed. "Mom, that's not fair. Isn't it? You spent months building a case that I was incompetent, forgetful, and unable to manage my own affairs. What would you call that?" The buzzer for the start of the game saved her from responding. She retreated to her seat beside Kevin, who hadn't bothered to come greet me. I focused on Tyler, cheering appropriately when his team scored, careful to keep my distance during the breaks. This wasn't the place for the deeper conversation that needed to happen. Tyler spotted me during the second period. I saw the exact moment. His head turning during a line change, the double take, the wide smile breaking across his face as he waved frantically from the bench. I waved back, blinking away unexpected tears. Whatever complications existed with Melissa, my relationship with Tyler remained untarnished. After the game, a 3-2 victory with Tyler assisting on the winning goal, I waited by the lobby as the players emerged from the locker room. He burst through the doors and ran straight to me, still flushed with victory and the simple joy of seeing his grandmother. "You really came," he exclaimed, throwing his arms around my waist. "Mom said you might someday, but I didn't know it would be today." I hugged him back, inhaling the familiar scent of his hair beneath the stronger locker room odors. I wouldn't miss watching my star hockey player, would I? That was an amazing pass on the winning goal. His face lit up as he launched into a detailed analysis of the game, the opposing team's weaknesses, his own missed opportunities. Some things never change. Children always want to know you really saw them, really paid attention to their achievements. Melissa and Kevin approached cautiously, hovering at the edge of our reunion like uncertain satellites. "Tyler, we need to get going," Kevin said after a few minutes. "Grandma probably has a long drive back to wherever she's staying." The pointed reference to my undisclosed location wasn't subtle, but I ignored it. "Actually," I said, looking directly at Melissa, "I was hoping to take Tyler for lunch to celebrate his win. If that's all right with you both." The flash of panic in Melissa's eyes was unmistakable. She hadn't anticipated this request and wasn't prepared to deal with it. Kevin stepped in smoothly. We already have reservations at Tyler's favorite pizza place. The whole team is going, he said. Maybe another time? Tyler's face fell immediately. Can't Grandma come too? Please? The manipulation was transparent. There likely was no team lunch. But challenging it would only put Tyler in the middle of adult tensions. I knelt to his level, tapping the end of his nose the way I used to when he was small. Another time, buddy, I promise. But maybe next weekend I could come watch your game again, and we could have that lunch afterward? His disappointment transformed into excitement at the prospect of a definite plan. Next Saturday is an away game in Tacoma, he informed me, solemnly. But Sunday we're playing here again. Sunday it is then, I agreed, standing to face Melissa and Kevin again. Does that work with your schedule? They could hardly refuse with Tyler bouncing on his toes between us, eyes shining. With anticipation, Melissa nodded stiffly. Sunday should be fine, she managed. Game's at 11. Perfect, I'll be there. I gave Tyler one more hug, whispering that I was proud of him, then walked toward the exit. Mom, wait, Melissa called, jogging to catch up with me while Kevin distracted Tyler. Are you staying in Seattle tonight? No, I said simply. I'm driving back. To Portland? She asked, a familiar, calculating look in her eyes. The investigator hadn't found me yet, and she was still fishing. To my home, I replied, deliberately vague. She sighed, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture she'd had since childhood. This isn't easy for any of us, you know. You disappeared. We thought something terrible might have happened. Until you found my letter, I reminded her, which made it very clear that I was fine and had chosen to leave. But why? Everything was going well. We were just trying to help organize your affairs, make things simpler. You were trying to take control of my life, Melissa. Let's not rewrite history. You decided I was incompetent based on flimsy evidence, invaded my privacy, impersonated me to financial institutions, and plotted to move me into assisted living, all without a single honest conversation about my wishes. Her expression hardened. You're exaggerating. We were concerned about some worrying signs. That's what responsible children do when their parents age. Responsible children talk to their parents first. They don't scheme behind their backs and prepare legal documents transferring control of all assets. I kept my voice steady, determined, not to create a scene in the arena lobby where families were still passing by. We should discuss this somewhere private, Melissa said, glancing around nervously. Not here. I agree, but not today. I came for Tyler, not to rehash everything that went wrong between us. She looked momentarily lost, the confident financial advisor facade cracking to reveal the daughter who didn't understand why her mother had walked away. In that brief window of vulnerability, I saw how she must have rationalized her actions, casting herself as the responsible protector rather than the controlling manipulator. Next Sunday, after Tyler's game and our lunch, I suggested, we can talk then, just you and me. Relief washed over her face. Okay, yes, that would be good. I nodded and turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Melissa. Call off your investigator. He's wasting your money and invading my privacy. Neither of us needs that stress. Her shock at being caught was almost comical. How did you... I've spent decades navigating international business. Did you really think I wouldn't notice someone digging into my affairs? Professional courtesy, Melissa. Call it off. I didn't wait for her response, just walked calmly to my car with my head high and shoulders straight. Only when I was miles outside Seattle, the familiar skyline receding in my rearview mirror, did I allow my hands to shake on the steering wheel. The encounter had been draining but necessary, a first step toward whatever new relationship might be possible with my daughter. Back in Portland, I found myself too restless to settle into my usual evening routine. Instead, I drove to the small pier near my cottage and walked along the waterfront. The Columbia River stretched wide and powerful before me, its currents a reminder that sometimes the strongest path forward is to flow around obstacles rather than trying to break through them directly. My phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Investigator terminated. We'll talk Sunday. A small victory, but significant. It suggested she was willing to engage on more equal terms. Whether that would translate into genuine understanding remained to be seen. The week passed quickly. I had a routine now in Portland. Mornings in my studio attempting to rekindle the artistic talents I'd abandoned for business decades ago. Afternoons at various galleries and arts organizations where I'd begun volunteering. I'd made new friends, mostly creative types who found my business background intriguing rather than defining. None of them knew about my wealth or family complications. To them, I was simply Barbara, the former consultant trying her hand at painting, generous with both time and encouragement. Sunday arrived with clearer skies than the previous weekend. I arrived at the rink early, watching the maintenance crew finish preparing the ice. This time, when Melissa and Tyler arrived, the initial shock was absent, replaced by cautious warmth from Tyler and guarded politeness from his parents. True to his nature, Tyler performed brilliantly under the knowledge his grandmother was watching, scoring 2 goals and playing with infectious energy. I cheered loudly for each achievement, secretly pleased to notice Melissa glancing back at me with an expression that bordered on nostalgic. Perhaps she was remembering her own childhood games, when I'd been her most vocal supporter. The promised lunch afterward was at a family restaurant near the arena. Kevin made excuses about a work emergency, clearly orchestrated to give Melissa and me privacy for our discussion. Tyler dominated the conversation through the meal, catching me up on school projects, friends, and his collection of hockey cards. I listened attentively, asking questions and marveling at how articulate he'd become at just 8 years old. When he went to explore the restaurant's small arcade section, Melissa finally turned to face me fully. "You look good, Mom," she admitted. "Healthy? Rested?" "I am both of those things," I confirmed. "My life now suits me." She twisted her napkin between her fingers. "Where exactly is that life? The investigator couldn't find any property purchases under your name in Portland or anywhere in Oregon. That was rather the point of having the investigator fail, wasn't it?" I smiled slightly. "I value my privacy now more than ever." "But you're in Portland? That much is true?" I considered how much to reveal. "Yes. I have a lovely place near the water. It's smaller than the Seattle house, but perfect for my needs. And financially, you're managing?" The question carried layers of meaning, genuine concern mixed with curiosity about assets she couldn't account for. "More than adequately," I assured her. "You don't need to worry about my financial situation. It was never actually in jeopardy." She flinched slightly. "Mom, about all that. I think there were misunderstandings on both sides." "Were there? Let me be clear about what happened from my perspective." I leaned forward, keeping my voice gentle but firm. "I overheard you telling Kevin I was financially incompetent. I discovered you were questioning my bank about transfers to my legitimate business. You accessed my accounts without permission, impersonated me on phone calls, and tried to get confidential documents from my attorney. You and Kevin presented me with papers to sign that would have given you control over every aspect of my life. Tell me what part of that I've misunderstood." Her cheeks flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and defensiveness. "When you list it all like that, it sounds terrible. But Mom, we notice things. Memory lapses, confusion with numbers, mood changes. The gallery seemed like an impulsive decision after decades of careful planning. We consulted with specialists who said these could be early warning signs. We were trying to protect you." "From what exactly? Making my own choices? Living my own life?" "From making mistakes you couldn't recover from," she insisted. From predatory people who take advantage of seniors. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was little humor in it. The irony being that the only people attempting to control my finances were my own daughter and son-in-law. She recoiled as if slapped. That's not fair. We had your best interests at heart. Perhaps you believed that, I allowed. But you never asked me what I thought my best interests were. You decided I was declining based on superficial evidence and proceeded accordingly. Tyler returned then, pockets jingling with the tickets he'd won, delaying the heavier parts of our conversation. We spent another hour in the restaurant, focused on him, before I announced it was time for me to head back. In the parking lot, Tyler hugged me fiercely, extracting another promise that I'd return for next week's game. When he dashed back to the car to retrieve a drawing he wanted to give me, Melissa seized the moment. "This can't be it," she said urgently. "We have more to discuss." "We do," I agreed, "but not with Tyler nearby and not rushed. Why don't you come to Portland next Saturday? Without Kevin, without Tyler, just you and me." She hesitated. "You'd tell me where you live?" "I would, because despite everything, you're still my daughter, and I'd like to believe we can find a way forward. But it needs to be on terms we both agree to, with mutual respect." The relief in her eyes was palpable. "Yes, Saturday. I'll come." Tyler returned with his drawing, a carefully rendered hockey player with my name written on the jersey, and another round of goodbyes ensued. As I drove away, I watched them in my rearview mirror, Tyler waving enthusiastically while Melissa stood with one hand on his shoulder, her expression unreadable at this distance. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Not just physical preparation of my cottage for a visitor, but emotional readiness for the conversation ahead. I consulted with Rick, ensuring I had clarity about which financial matters I was willing to discuss and which remained private. I spoke with Diana, who offered to be coincidentally in town if I needed backup. I declined her offer, knowing this confrontation needed to happen without witnesses. Whatever Melissa and I had to say to each other, painful or healing, required privacy and honesty above all else. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool. I texted Melissa my address at precisely 8 a.m., along with suggestions for parking. Her response came immediately. "On my way. Should arrive around 11. I spent the intervening hours in my studio, finding peace in the rhythmic application of paint to canvas. My artistic skills were still developing, but there was satisfaction in creating something simply for the joy of it, without concern for profit or practicality. It represented everything about my new life that Melissa had failed to understand about my old one. That value isn't always measured in dollars, and security isn't always about accumulation. Her car pulled into the driveway at 10:58. Always punctual. My daughter. I watched from the window as she emerged, looking up at my modest cottage with undisguised curiosity. She wore casual clothes, jeans and a light sweater, rather than her usual business attire. A small concession to the nature of this visit, perhaps. I opened the door before she could knock. "Welcome to my home." She stepped inside, eyes sweeping the open-plan living area with its wall of windows facing the water. "It's beautiful," she admitted, sounding genuinely surprised. "Not what I expected." "What did you expect?" I asked, gesturing for her to take a seat on the sofa while I poured coffee I'd prepared. "Something more? Temporary. Like you were hiding out rather than building a life." She accepted the mug gratefully, warming her hands around it. "This feels permanent." "It is," I confirmed, sitting across from her in my favorite chair. "I'm not coming back to Seattle, Melissa. Not to live. This is my home now." She nodded, slowly, absorbing this finality. "You've made a real life here. New friends? New activities?" "Yes to both. I volunteer at several arts organizations. I'm learning to paint finally. I have neighbors I enjoy, a book club that challenges Me intellectually, even a walking group that meets 3 mornings a week. That all sounds healthy, she conceded. But did you have to disappear to create this life? Couldn't you have just told us you wanted more independence? I studied her face, searching for genuine understanding rather than the placating tone financial advisors use with difficult clients. Would you have listened, or would you have seen it as further evidence of my decline, an elderly woman insisting she's fine when clearly she needs help? She opened her mouth to object, then closed it again, honesty winning out. I don't know. I do, I said gently. You and Kevin had already decided I was incompetent. Everything I said or did was filtered through that assumption. Nothing I could have said would have changed your minds because you weren't really listening anymore. She stared into her coffee. We were concerned. There were signs. What signs, Melissa? Be specific. What did I do that convinced you I could no longer manage my own affairs? She set her mug down, straightening as if preparing for a professional presentation. You forgot appointments. You made calculation errors. You seemed withdrawn sometimes, distracted. The gallery was completely out of character. A major financial decision made suddenly after decades of careful planning. And there were those strange withdrawals. Let me address each of those, I replied calmly. The appointments I missed were few and far between, typically because I was focused on the gallery, a new business requiring my attention. The calculation errors were minimal and corrected immediately when discovered, hardly evidence of cognitive decline. As for being withdrawn, perhaps I was processing the realization that my daughter was investigating me behind my back. Her cheeks flushed again. And the gallery? The withdrawals? The gallery was a dream deferred, not an impulsive decision. I've loved art my entire life, but put my creative aspirations aside to build my career and raise you alone. As for the withdrawals, they funded legitimate business expenses and personal investments, all of which were properly documented in records you weren't entitled to examine. She flinched at the directness of my response. You make us sound like villains, like we were trying to rob you or something. We were worried, Mom. Genuinely worried. I believe you were, I conceded. But worry doesn't justify the steps you took. You violated my privacy. You made decisions about my life without consulting me. You treated me as though my autonomy was already gone when there was no real evidence to support that conclusion. What were we supposed to do? Wait until something catastrophic happened? Until you made some irreversible financial mistake? You were supposed to talk to me, I said firmly. Openly and honestly, adult to adult, without assumptions. You were supposed to respect that I've successfully managed complex international business dealings for decades and might actually know what I'm doing with my own finances. Melissa stood abruptly, walking to the windows to stare out at the water. Her shoulders were tense, hands clasped tightly behind her back. The posture she adopted when feeling defensive. It's not that simple, she said finally. Dad died young. You've been the only parent I've ever really known. The idea of losing you, of watching you decline. Her voice caught. I was scared, Mom. We've seen it with Kevin's father. How quickly someone can go from fine to not fine, how the early warning signs were there but nobody acted until it was too late. For the first time, I felt a genuine softening toward her position. Fear was a powerful motivator, and watching her father-in-law's decline with early-onset dementia had clearly affected her deeply. I understand fear, I said more gently, but fear doesn't justify controlling behavior. It doesn't make it okay to take over someone else's life. She turned back to face me, eyes suspiciously bright. So what happens now? We just pretend none of this happened? See each other at Tyler's hockey games and make polite conversation? No, I said, rising to join her by the windows. We acknowledge what happened. You recognize that you overstepped significantly, and I acknowledge that your intentions, however misguided, came from a place of concern. Then we establish new boundaries for our relationship going forward. What kind of boundaries? My finances remain entirely my business. No questions, no investigations, no helpful suggestions unless I specifically ask for advice. My living arrangements are my choice. My activities, my friends, my decisions about how to spend my time and money, all mine to determine. She nodded slowly. And in return? In return, I promise to maintain regular contact, to be present in Tyler's life. To be honest with you, if I ever do face health challenges that affect my decision-making capacity, and to have proper legal documents in place, which I already do, specifying exactly what should happen in those circumstances. You already have those documents? She asked, surprised. Of course I do. Rick helped me prepare them years ago, and update them regularly. I've always been meticulous about planning, Melissa. Did you think I wouldn't have considered these possibilities? She looked embarrassed. I guess we assumed since you never discussed it with us. Because it wasn't yet your concern, I said simply. There are aspects of my life that remain private, not because I'm hiding anything worrisome, but because they're mine to manage until circumstances necessitate otherwise. Like these mysterious offshore accounts Tyler mentioned, she said, attempting a light tone that didn't quite succeed. He said something about you having money in other countries that we never knew about. I raised an eyebrow. Tyler has quite an imagination. Mom, please, no more games. The house sold for well above market value, yet you maintained it was your primary asset. The gallery was barely breaking even, but you funded it easily. You disappeared and established this new life without touching your Seattle accounts. Where did the money come from? I considered the question carefully. Trust needed to be rebuilt between us, but that didn't mean total transparency was required. Some boundaries were healthy, especially given recent history. My international consulting career was more successful than you realized, I said finally. I maintained investments abroad that provided additional income and security, all perfectly legal, all properly reported to tax authorities. But you never told me about them, she pressed. No, because they weren't relevant to your life, and because I've always believed in financial independence. Your father taught me that lesson early. Always maintain resources that are yours alone. She looked hurt. You didn't trust me. It wasn't about trust, initially. It was about proper professional management of international assets. Later, when you began investigating my finances without permission, it became about protecting myself. She winced at the blunt assessment. That makes us sound like enemies. Not enemies, I corrected gently. Just two adults with different priorities who needed better boundaries. You wanted control out of fear. I wanted autonomy out of principle. Neither of us communicated effectively. Melissa returned to the sofa, shoulders slumping slightly. So where does this leave us? I rejoined her, sitting close enough that our knees nearly touched. That depends on you. Can you accept that I'm competent to manage my own affairs? That I may make choices you wouldn't make, but that doesn't mean they're wrong? That I'm entitled to privacy even from my own daughter? She was quiet for a long moment, truly considering the questions rather than rushing to answer. Finally, she nodded. I think I can. It won't be easy. I've spent months thinking of you as someone who needed protection, even from yourself. But this, she gestured around the cottage, this isn't the home of someone in decline. And you're more yourself than I've seen in years, more alive. That's because I am more myself, I told her. For decades, I was defined primarily as a business consultant, then as your mother. Now I'm just Barbara, a woman exploring new interests, making new friends, creating a life that feels authentic to who I am now. It suits you, she admitted. I can see that. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking. really talking, in ways we hadn't in years. I showed her my studio, my amateur paintings that made her smile with genuine appreciation. We walked along the waterfront, greeting neighbors who waved warmly. She met my friend Eleanor from the walking group who happened to pass by. Through it all, I could see her reassessing her assumptions, adjusting to this new reality where her mother wasn't declining, but evolving. As evening approached, she reluctantly prepared to leave. "Tyler's going to want to know everything about your house," she said, smiling. "He already thinks you're living in some magical artist cottage." "Bring him next time," I suggested. "There's a spare room he could stay in for a weekend. You too, if you wanted." Her eyes widened with surprise at the invitation. "Really? You'd be okay with that?" "We're rebuilding, Melissa. One step at a time." I hugged her goodbye, feeling muscles relax that had been tense for months. "Tell Kevin. Tell him I understand his concerns came from caring about you and Tyler. But make sure he understands that my financial affairs are no longer open for discussion or management." She nodded, a glimmer of the competent professional visible in her straightened shoulders. "I'll make that very clear." As her car disappeared down the lane, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that the confrontation had gone better than expected, cautious hope for our future relationship, and a lingering wariness born from betrayal not yet fully processed. Trust, once broken, could be repaired, but the fracture lines would always remain visible if you knew where to look. Our relationship would be different now, more carefully defined, more conscious of boundaries, perhaps ultimately healthier, for having weathered this crisis. I turned back to my cottage as twilight settled over the river. On my desk sat the folder Rick had delivered yesterday: confirmation that Tyler's education trust was fully funded and legally protected, documentation of my various offshore holdings, updated power of attorney documents that specified exactly when and how medical professionals, not family members, could determine if intervention was necessary. Melissa would never know the full extent of my financial resources. That boundary would remain firm. But she would know that her mother was not only competent, but astute, capable of protecting herself even from those who claimed to be protecting her. Sometimes love requires distance to flourish. Sometimes trust requires testing to strengthen. And sometimes the offshore accounts you never reveal become the foundation not just of financial security, but of personal freedom. The freedom to define relationships on your own terms, to set boundaries that preserve dignity, and to create a life that reflects your truest self, not others' expectations. I picked up my paintbrush and turned to the half-finished canvas waiting on my easel. The setting sun cast golden light across the water, illuminating possibilities I was only beginning to explore. At 61, I was finally the author of my own story, all chapters still unwritten, all horizons still mine to chase. 6 months after Melissa's visit to my Portland cottage, our carefully reconstructed relationship was tested in ways neither of us had anticipated. It began with a phone call on a rainy Tuesday morning as I was setting up a new canvas in my studio. "Mom?" Melissa's voice had that artificial steadiness that immediately put me on alert. "Do you have a minute to talk?" I set down my palette knife, wiping my hands on a cloth. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Not exactly." She took a deep breath. "Kevin's been placed on administrative leave at his firm. There's an investigation into some of his real estate dealings." The news wasn't entirely surprising. Kevin had always struck me as someone who operated in gray areas, professionally speaking. His ambition often seemed to outpace his ethics. "What kind of investigation?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "They're saying he misrepresented some investment properties to clients, used inflated appraisals, manipulated occupancy data." Her voice cracked slightly. "The state licensing board is involved now, and there's talk of criminal charges." "I see," I said carefully. "How are you holding up?" "Barely," she admitted. "Our assets are frozen pending the investigation. Our credit cards were canceled yesterday. Tyler, her voice broke. Tyler's hockey league has an away tournament next weekend in Vancouver, and I can't even pay for his hotel room. I closed my eyes, sensing where this conversation was headed. The last 6 months had been promising. Regular visits, respectful boundaries, no further attempts to access my finances. Was this a genuine crisis or a sophisticated play to reestablish financial dependence? That sounds incredibly stressful, I said, choosing my words with care. What can I do to help? Her relief was audible. If you could help with Tyler's tournament expenses, just until this gets sorted out, it's about $800 for the hotel and meals. I hate asking, but I'll transfer the money today, I interrupted gently. Supporting my grandson's activities was reasonable, regardless of the circumstances. Is there anything else Tyler needs right now? Thank you, she whispered. No, he's okay for now. We're trying to keep things as normal as possible for him. He doesn't know the details, just that Dad's having some work problems. That's wise, I agreed. Children are perceptive, but they don't need adult burdens. There was a pause, loaded with unspoken questions. I waited, sensing she was gathering courage to ask for more substantial help. Mom, she finally said, I know we've just rebuilt our trust and I promised not to ask about your finances, but this situation might get bad, really bad. If Kevin is found guilty, there will be fines, legal fees, possible restitution payments. Our savings won't cover it. What are you asking, Melissa? I'm not asking for a bailout, she clarified quickly. Just information. You mentioned international investments. Is there any way you could advise us on setting something up? Somewhere more protected? And there it was. The true purpose of the call. Not just immediate financial assistance, but access to the offshore accounts she still believed existed. Accounts that could potentially shield assets from legal judgments and creditors. Melissa, I said, my voice firmer now, are you asking me to help you hide assets from a legal investigation? No, not hide, she insisted. Just protect what's rightfully ours. Kevin made some mistakes in how things were presented to clients, but he didn't steal anything. They're trying to make an example of him because his firm is high profile. I took a deep breath, disappointed but not entirely surprised. I need to be very clear about something. First, any legitimate international investments require full disclosure to U.S. authorities. There's no legal way to simply move money offshore to avoid legal judgments. But my international assets were established legally throughout my consulting career? I interrupted firmly. They were earned abroad, invested abroad, and properly reported on all tax filings. They aren't a mechanism for avoiding legal obligations. The silence on the other end of the line stretched uncomfortably. I'll help with Tyler's expenses, I continued. In fact, I'm happy to cover any of his activities or needs during this difficult time. But I won't participate in anything that even approaches legal impropriety, and I strongly advise you against it as well. That path would only compound your problems. When Melissa finally spoke, her voice was tight with barely contained frustration. So all that talk about international consulting success was just a way of saying you have money, but won't help us when we really need it. The unfairness of this characterization stung, but I recognized it as the desperate lashing out of someone under extreme stress. I'm offering to help Tyler, I reminded her gently. And I'm willing to discuss other specific needs you might have. But I won't provide financial advice that could put you at further legal risk, nor will I compromise my own financial security for situations I didn't create. Fine, she said curtly. Just the tournament money then. Melissa, I have to go. Kevin's calling on the other line. Probably more bad news. She hung up without saying goodbye. I set my phone down and turned to the empty canvas before me. With broad, angry strokes, I began laying down a dark background, working through my emotional response to the conversation. Hurt that she'd immediately reverted to seeing me as a potential resource rather than a person with legitimate boundaries. Worried about Tyler's stability during what would undoubtedly be a turbulent time. Angry at Kevin for putting my daughter and grandson in this position, through what sounded like genuine misconduct. Later that afternoon, I called Rick for a reality check and legal perspective. "You handled it exactly right," he assured me after hearing the details. "If Kevin is under investigation for financial irregularities, any unusual money movements now would be heavily scrutinized. Melissa may not realize it, but you protected her by refusing." "She doesn't see it that way," I sighed. "She sees it as abandonment when they need help most." "That's her immediate emotional response," Rick said pragmatically. "Give her time. Meanwhile, let's make sure your support for Tyler is properly documented as grandparent expenses, completely separate from Kevin's legal issues." I followed Rick's advice, setting up a dedicated account specifically for Tyler's activities and needs, with meticulous record-keeping. The Vancouver tournament went smoothly from Tyler's perspective. His team placed second, and he scored several goals, but Melissa remained distant during our brief interactions at the event. 2 weeks later, the situation escalated dramatically. I was having lunch with Eleanor at our favorite Riverside cafe when my phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. "FBI at our house with search warrant. Taking computers, files. What do we do?" I immediately excused myself and called her, but the call went straight to voicemail. Next, I called Rick, who promised to reach out to colleagues in Seattle who specialized in federal investigations. By evening, I had pieced together the situation through various sources. Kevin's irregularities were apparently far more serious than initially suggested. The investigation now involved bank fraud, wire fraud, and possible money laundering. Melissa finally called back around 9 that night, her voice hollow with shock. "They took everything, Mom. Computers, phones, even Tyler's iPad. They went through every drawer, every closet." "Where are you now?" I asked. "A hotel. Kevin's attorney said we shouldn't stay at the house." She lowered her voice. "They froze all our accounts, every single one, even my personal checking. Account that has nothing to do with Kevin's business." "That suggests they believe the accounts may contain proceeds from illegal activities," I said quietly. "Melissa, how much did you know about Kevin's business practices?" "Nothing. I mean, I knew he was aggressive with investments, but that's standard in high-end real estate. Everyone does it." "Everyone does not commit bank fraud," I corrected gently. "Has Kevin been honest with you about what's really going on?" Her silence was telling. "Melissa, listen to me. You need your own attorney, separate from Kevin's, someone who represents your interests exclusively." "I can't afford an attorney," she said bitterly. "I can't afford anything right now." "I'll take care of it," I promised. "I'll have Rick recommend someone excellent." "Why would you do that after I basically accused you of not helping us?" "Because you're my daughter," I said simply. "And because I want to make sure you and Tyler are protected, regardless of what Kevin may have done." 2 days later, I drove to Seattle to meet with Melissa and the attorney Rick had arranged, Catherine Lawson, a formidable former prosecutor who specialized in helping spouses disentangle themselves from their partner's financial crimes. We gathered in a conference room at Catherine's downtown office, the city skyline visible through rain-streaked windows. Catherine was refreshingly direct. "Mrs. Williams, based on what I've learned so far, your husband appears to have been operating a fairly sophisticated scheme for at least 3 years. The properties his firm was selling to investors either didn't exist as described or were grossly misrepresented." Melissa shook her head in denial. "That can't be right. I've seen the properties. We've visited them." "You've seen properties," Catherine corrected, "but were they the same ones investors were shown in prospectuses? Did you verify the occupancy, rates, or rental incomes being claimed?" Melissa's face crumpled. "No, that wasn't I trusted him." Catherine's expression softened slightly. Many spouses in your situation do. The good news is that there's currently no evidence suggesting you were involved in or had knowledge of the fraudulent activities. The bad news is that assets acquired during your marriage are considered marital property, which means they're subject to seizure if they were purchased with tainted funds. Everything we have was purchased during our marriage, Melissa whispered. The condo, the cars, even Tyler's college fund that my firm manages. That's why we need to act quickly, Catherine said. We need to establish what assets, if any, are legitimately yours and separate from your husband's activities. I listened carefully, noting how this situation paralleled my own experience with Melissa, the powerlessness of having one's financial autonomy threatened, the sense of betrayal from someone trusted. The irony wasn't lost on me, though I took no satisfaction in her predicament. After Catherine outlined the next steps, Melissa and I walked to a nearby cafe to talk privately. Seattle's persistent drizzle matched her mood, her shoulders hunched, under a raincoat that suddenly seemed too thin for the chilly spring air. I feel like such a fool, she said as we settled at a corner table with steaming mugs of tea. All those trips he took, the late nights, the sudden cash influxes he attributed to bonus structures. I should have asked more questions. You trusted your husband, I said. That's not foolish, it's human. She looked up at me, eyes red-rimmed. Like I trusted you, and then investigated your finances behind your back? The parallel hung between us, too obvious to ignore. Perhaps now you understand why I reacted as I did, I suggested carefully. Having someone question your competence, your judgment, your very autonomy. It cuts deeply. She nodded slowly. I get it now. I really do. The thing is, Mom, I always thought I was the financially savvy one in our relationship. The professional advisor. The careful planner. Now look at me. Homeless, penniless, with a child to support, and a husband who might go to prison. You're not homeless or penniless, I corrected gently. You have me. You have options. Do I? She asked, vulnerability naked in her expression. After everything? You do, I confirmed. But we need to be clear about what those options are and aren't. I outlined what I was prepared to do. Cover Catherine's legal fees, provide temporary housing for her and Tyler, ensure Tyler's education and activities continued uninterrupted. What I wouldn't do? Bail out Kevin, hide assets, or undermine the legal process in any way. What about longer term? She asked. If Kevin goes to prison, if they take everything, I'll have to start over completely at 35. Many people start over, I reminded her. I effectively started over at 61. But you had resources, she countered. Your mysterious international investments. I studied her face, weighing how much to reveal. The offshore accounts she imagined were both more and less than she envisioned. Legitimate investments from decades of international work, properly declared but carefully segregated for my own protection. Precisely the protection she now desperately needed herself. Melissa, I'm going to tell you something I've never shared before. I began carefully. Not because I think you need to know my financial details, but because I think the lesson might help you now. She leaned forward, curiosity momentarily eclipsing her distress. When your father died, I was 31 with a 5-year-old daughter and very limited resources. David's life insurance barely covered the funeral expenses. His parents offered financial help, but with controlling strings attached. I refused. I never knew that, she murmured. Instead of accepting their conditions, I took the risk of building my consulting business, specializing in Asian markets at a time when few Western women were taken seriously in those environments. It was brutally difficult. There were trips where I had to choose between a decent hotel and bringing back a gift for you. Meetings where I was the only woman in the room, expected to fail. Clients who tested me at every turn. She listened, intently seeing a side of my history I'd previously kept private. What I learned through that experience was invaluable. Financial independence isn't just about having money. It's about having options, knowledge, and control over your own economic destiny. When my business finally succeeded, I made a solemn promise to myself. Never again would I be financially vulnerable to anyone else's decisions or whims. The offshore accounts, she said, understanding dawning. Not exactly offshore in the way people imagine, I clarified. But yes, international investments structured to remain independent and protected, even if domestic circumstances changed, not hidden from tax authorities, but diversified across jurisdictions that value financial privacy. And that's how you were able to walk away and start over in Portland. I nodded. The Seattle assets, the house, the declared investments, those were just the visible portion. But they weren't my security. They were simply part of a life I'd built. My true security lay in knowing I had resources no one could access but me. Melissa absorbed this, hands wrapped around her cooling tea. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're at a crossroads similar to where I was after David died. You can define yourself as a victim of Kevin's choices, or you can see this as an opportunity to rebuild with wiser eyes and stronger boundaries. That's easy to say with a safety net, she pointed out. Which is why I'm offering you one, I replied. Not unlimited funds, not a bailout for Kevin, but enough support to give you time and space to rebuild on your own terms. And what do you want in return? She asked cautiously. The question stung, revealing how transactional she still believed relationships to be. Another of Kevin's influences, perhaps. I want what I've always wanted, I said honestly. A healthy relationship with my daughter based on mutual respect. I want Tyler to grow up understanding that resilience matters more than resources. And I want you to find the strength I know you have, the strength to start over without compromising your integrity. Our conversation was interrupted by a call from Catherine, who had just received new information. The FBI had identified accounts in the Cayman Islands linked to Kevin's activities, accounts he had apparently established 18 months earlier, around the same time Melissa and he had begun questioning my financial competence. The timing was too neat to be coincidental. Their concern about my financial irregularities had likely been projection. Kevin recognizing in my international travels and independent resources a mirror of his own offshore activities. But while mine were legitimate, his were apparently designed specifically to hide fraudulent gains. After the call, Melissa looked physically ill. He was setting up offshore accounts while questioning your mental competence for having the same thing? The hypocrisy is staggering. The difference is legitimacy, I reminded her. My accounts were established throughout decades of international business, with all proper reporting. His appear to have been created specifically to hide questionable funds. She nodded slowly, a new understanding dawning in her eyes. All those conversations about your strange withdrawals and financial confusion. That was Kevin projecting, wasn't it? Seeing suspicious behavior because he was engaged in it himself. It seems likely, I agreed gently. And I bought into it completely, she whispered. I became his accomplice in questioning you, all while he was actually committing financial crimes. The realization seemed to physically diminish her, shoulders slumping under the weight of complicity, however unwitting. You weren't an accomplice, I assured her. You were manipulated by someone you trusted. There's a difference. In the weeks that followed, Kevin's legal situation deteriorated rapidly. He was formally indicted on multiple felony counts, with evidence suggesting the fraud was both more extensive and had been going on longer than initially thought. His attorney began floating the possibility of a plea deal, recognizing the strength of the government's case. Meanwhile, Melissa and Tyler moved into a modest apartment I helped secure, close enough to Tyler's school that his routine remained relatively stable. Catherine worked aggressively to legally separate Melissa's legitimate assets from those tainted by Kevin's activities, successfully arguing that her retirement account and certain personal property should be excluded from asset seizures. Through it all, I maintained the boundaries I'd established, financially supporting Melissa and Tyler's immediate needs without enabling Kevin or interfering with legal proceedings. I visited Seattle weekly, providing emotional support while respecting Melissa's need to process her new reality independently. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of her apartment watching Tyler practice hockey shots in the small courtyard, below, Melissa turned to me with newfound clarity in her eyes. "I understand now why you were so protective of your financial independence," she said quietly. "I thought it was about not trusting me, but it was really about self-preservation." "It was about maintaining control over my own life," I confirmed. "Something everyone deserves, regardless of age." She nodded slowly. "When Kevin and I were questioning your competence, planning to take over your finances, how did that feel?" "Like a fundamental violation," I said honestly. As if the decades I'd spent building a successful career, making sound decisions, creating security for myself counted for nothing. As if my identity could be reduced to a set of accounts to be managed by others who presumed to know better. "That's exactly how I feel about what Kevin did," she said, realization dawning in her expression. "He made financial decisions that have devastated our family, all while maintaining the fiction that he was the competent one, the provider, the protector." "The parallels aren't lost on me," I acknowledged. "I'm sorry," she said, turning to face me directly. "Truly sorry for how we treated you. The lack of respect, the assumptions, the manipulation. I was so certain we were acting in your best interest that I never questioned whether we had the right to act at all." The apology, so long awaited, washed over me with unexpected emotional force. Not because I had been waiting for her to suffer before acknowledging my pain, but because I recognized the genuine understanding behind her words. It wasn't an apology born from desperation or strategy, but from true comprehension of what she had done. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means more than you know." Tyler looked up from his practice, waving excitedly when he executed a particularly impressive shot. We both waved back, momentarily united in grandmother-mother pride. "What happens now?" Melissa asked, turning back to me. "With us, I mean." "We continue rebuilding," I said. "One conversation, one honest exchange at a time. We maintain healthy boundaries while supporting each other through difficult circumstances. We model for Tyler what resilience and integrity look like." "And financially?" she pressed, the financial advisor in her still seeking concrete plans. "You focus on stabilizing your professional reputation, which thankfully appears unaffected by Kevin's actions. I continue supporting your immediate needs while you rebuild. When you're ready, perhaps we discuss longer-term planning, not with me managing your finances or you investigating mine, but as two independent adults sharing knowledge and resources." She nodded slowly. "That sounds healthy. Different from what we've ever done before, but healthy." As the sun set over Seattle's skyline, casting long shadows across the courtyard where Tyler continued his determined practice, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The circumstances that had brought us to this moment were painful, the betrayals on multiple levels still raw. But adversity often reveals truths that comfort conceals. In losing the facade of perfect family harmony, perhaps we were finding something more valuable, authentic connection based on mutual respect rather than control or dependency. Later that night, after Tyler had gone to bed, Melissa and I sat at her small kitchen table reviewing practical matters, upcoming legal appointments, school activities, budget considerations. She handled each topic with newfound maturity, asking for input without surrendering autonomy, seeking support without demanding rescue. "There's one more thing," she said hesitantly as we finished. "I've been offered a position at a smaller firm across town. Less prestigious than my current role, but more flexible hours for Tyler. The thing is," she paused, gathering courage, "they've asked me to bring on a senior consultant with international experience to help them expand their client base. Someone who understands Asian markets particularly." I raised an eyebrow, immediately understanding the implication. "Are you asking me to work with you professionally?" "Only if you're interested," she hastened to add. "You've built a new life in Portland, and I respect that completely. But your expertise is exactly what they're looking for, and I thought, maybe a few days a month? It would be on your terms entirely." The offer was unexpected, yet somehow fitting. A professional acknowledgement of my capabilities, a tangible demonstration of her newfound respect for my experience and judgment. "I'd need to know more details," I said cautiously. "Scope, expectations, time commitment." "Of course," she agreed quickly. "No pressure at all. It just seemed like maybe, after everything, there might be a way to rebuild that integrates our strengths rather than setting them against each other." In that moment, I glimpsed a future different from anything I had imagined. Not a complete return to my former life, nor a permanent separation from my daughter, but a new configuration that honored both our independence and our connection. A relationship built on choice rather than obligation, on respect rather than control. "I'll consider it," I promised, meaning it sincerely. As I drove back to Portland the next day, the familiar highway stretching before me, I reflected on how dramatically circumstances had shifted in just a few months. The offshore accounts that had represented my secret security had become a symbol of something larger. The importance of maintaining one's independent identity even within the closest relationships. For Melissa, that lesson had come through painful betrayal. For me, it had come through the courage to walk away rather than surrender my autonomy. Neither path was easy. Both required facing difficult truths about those we loved and about ourselves. But in that honesty lay the possibility of something authentic. Relationships chosen with clear eyes rather than maintained through manipulation or dependency. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. "Tyler asking if you can come to his game. Next weekend. No pressure, just passing along the request." I smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it. Tell him Grandma's bringing her lucky scarf." The highway curved westward, raindrops beginning to speckle my windshield as the Columbia River came into view. Portland awaited, my cottage with its art studio and river views, my independent life carefully constructed on my own terms. Chatur now represented not just the past I had left, but a new connection being forged with deliberate care and mutual respect. The offshore accounts remained my private security, my hard-earned protection against life's uncertainties. But their true value lay not in the financial freedom they provided, but in the personal sovereignty they represented, the right to define my own life, make my own choices, and offer connection from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. That sovereignty, financial, emotional, spiritual, was the legacy I truly hoped to pass to Melissa. Not through inheritance, but through example. Not by rescuing her from consequences, but by showing her that rebuilding after devastation was not only possible, but potentially transformative. As I crossed the bridge into Oregon, rain giving way to unexpected sunshine, I felt a sense of peace settle around me. The journey wasn't over, the relationships not fully healed, the challenges not entirely resolved, but the path forward was clearer now, illuminated by hard-won wisdom and the courage to live authentically, regardless of others' expectations or judgments. The accounts she never found had protected more than my money. They had preserved my right to self-determination. And in the end, that was the most valuable asset of all. A year had passed since Kevin's indictment when I received an unexpected invitation from Melissa. "Mom, would you consider hosting Tyler for the summer? I have an opportunity to work on a project in Singapore for 2 months. It would be an important step in rebuilding my career, but I don't want to uproot him during the school break. My cottage by the Columbia River had gradually evolved to reflect my new life. The second bedroom transformed into a proper guest room, the garden flourishing with native plants, a small dock where I often sat in the evenings watching osprey dive for fish. It was a peaceful space, very different from the busy Seattle home where I'd raised Melissa. But would it engage an active 9-year-old boy for an entire summer? I'd love to have Tyler, I told her. But are you sure he won't be bored here? I'm hardly running a summer camp. Melissa laughed, the sound more relaxed than I'd heard in months. Actually, that's part of why I thought of you. After everything that's happened, I think Tyler needs some normalcy, the kind that comes from quiet mornings and home-cooked meals and someone who isn't constantly checking their phone for crisis updates. The request touched me deeply. Kevin had eventually accepted a plea deal, 5 years in federal, prison plus restitution, and Melissa had filed for divorce shortly afterward. She'd been rebuilding her life with remarkable resilience, taking the position at the smaller firm, moving to a modest townhouse in a family-friendly neighborhood, and working hard to provide Tyler with stability amid the upheaval. That she now trusted me enough to care for him during an extended absence represented a profound shift in our relationship. In that case, I'd be honored, I said. Does Tyler have any special summer activities he's interested in? Hockey? Of course. There's a summer skills camp in Portland he could attend. And he's recently become obsessed with fishing, though I've never taken him. The river is full of salmon and steelhead, I noted. I could teach him, though it's been years since I've fished myself. You fish? Melissa sounded genuinely surprised. Your grandfather taught me when I was about Tyler's age. I used to take you when you were little, but you hated it. All those squirming worms and flopping fish. You preferred the city pool. I'd forgotten that, she said softly. It's strange how childhood memories fade, isn't it? All those little moments. That seemed insignificant at the time. The conversation lingered in my mind as I prepared for Tyler's arrival. I found my old fishing gear in the cottage's small storage shed, purchased a child-sized rod and tackle box, and researched the best spots along this stretch of the Columbia for a beginner. I enrolled him in the hockey camp, investigated local hiking trails suitable for a 9-year-old, and stocked the refrigerator with the kinds of foods that would appeal to him while still being reasonably nutritious. When Melissa dropped him off on her way to the airport, Tyler bounded from the car with the exuberance unique to children his age. Grandma, Mom says there's a dock where we can fish right from your backyard. There is indeed, I confirmed, accepting his enthusiastic hug. And I've got all the gear ready for us to try tomorrow. Melissa followed more slowly, wheeling Tyler's suitcase up the garden path. Her eyes held a mixture of emotions, gratitude, lingering traces of anxiety, and something that looked almost like envy. This place keeps getting more beautiful, she observed, taking in the flowering rhododendrons and the newly built pergola covered in clematis. You've created something special here. It's a work in progress, I replied, like most worthwhile things. She nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in my words. Tyler has everything he needs in his suitcase. Emergency contacts are in the front pocket, along with his medication schedule, just the usual allergy pills in spring. I'll have reliable internet in Singapore, so we can video chat every few days. We'll be fine, I assured her. Go focus on your project. This is an important opportunity. She hugged me then, a genuine embrace without the tension that had characterized our physical contact for so long. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. After she left, Tyler and I settled into an exploration of the cottage and grounds. He was particularly impressed with the studio where I painted, examining my amateur canvases with serious consideration before declaring my river landscapes really good, actually. Would you like to try painting while you're here? I offered. I have plenty of supplies. He considered the question with endearing gravity. Maybe. But can we fish first? Mom says you know how to catch the really big ones. I laughed. Mom might be exaggerating my skills, but yes, we'll definitely fish. Starting tomorrow morning, the best time is just after sunrise. His eyes widened. Sunrise? Like, when it's still dark outside? That's when the fish are hungriest, I explained. Are you up for an adventure? His enthusiastic nod signaled the beginning of our summer together, a period that would transform our relationship in ways neither of us could have anticipated. The next morning found us at the dock well before dawn, bundled against the early morning chill, sipping hot chocolate from thermoses while I taught him how to bait his hook. His small fingers were surprisingly dexterous, his concentration intense as he listened to my instructions. "Grandma," he asked as we cast our lines into the still dark water, "is it true you have secret money hidden all over the world?" The question caught me completely off guard. "Where did you hear something like that?" He shrugged. Attention. Still focused on his bobber. "Dad told Mom once. He said you were smarter than she realized, that you had accounts no one could trace. I heard them fighting about it." I chose my words carefully, aware of the complex situation. "Your dad and Mom were going through a difficult time then. Sometimes when people are upset, they say things that aren't quite accurate." "So you don't have secret money?" He sounded disappointed. "What I have," I explained gently, "is financial security that I built through many years of hard work. I made smart investments in different countries where I worked. There's nothing secret or mysterious about it, just careful planning over a long time." He absorbed this with the remarkable adaptability of children. "Like saving your allowance, instead of spending it right away?" "Exactly like that," I agreed, pleased with his understanding. "Except over decades instead of weeks." "Cool," he said, then gasped as his rod suddenly bent double. "Grandma, I think I got one." The moment of financial inquisition passed as quickly as it had arrived, replaced by the excitement of Tyler's first catch, a respectable rainbow trout that we photographed extensively before releasing back into the river. Over the following days, we established a rhythm. Early mornings fishing or exploring the riverside trails, afternoons at hockey camp or working on art projects in my studio, evenings playing board games or reading together on the porch. Tyler proved to be surprisingly good company, curious, thoughtful, and refreshingly direct in his observations. "You're different here than you were in Seattle," he remarked one evening as we grilled our fresh-caught fish for dinner. "Different? How?" I asked, curious about his perception. He considered the question seriously. "More relaxed. Happier, I think. You laugh more." His insight was remarkably perceptive for a 9-year-old. "I think you're right," I acknowledged. "This place suits me. I feel more like myself here." "Mom's different now, too," he offered. "Since Dad went away, she doesn't yell as much, and she plays hockey with me sometimes." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "But she works a lot," he added. "And sometimes she looks sad when she thinks I'm not watching." The observation tugged at my heart. "Your mom has been dealing with some very hard changes," I said gently. "She's incredibly strong, but even strong people feel sad sometimes." "Because of what Dad did?" "Partly that," I confirmed, "and partly because change itself can be difficult, even when it's ultimately for the better." He nodded solemnly. "Like when you moved away from Seattle. Was that hard even though it made you happier?" Very perceptive, Tyler. "Yes, it was. Leaving behind familiar places and routines is challenging, even when you're choosing it for good reasons." He seemed satisfied with this explanation, returning his attention to monitoring the fish on the grill. But his questions lingered in my mind, reminding me how perceptively children observe the adults in their lives, often seeing truths we try to conceal even from ourselves. Our regular video chats with Melissa revealed a gradual transformation, in her as well. The Singapore assignment clearly energized her professionally, drawing on her financial expertise while stretching her in new directions. With each call, she seemed more confident, more animated when describing her work, less consumed by the aftermath of Kevin's downfall. "You look like you're thriving," I observed during one of our conversations, after Tyler had wandered off to feed the family of ducks that had taken up residence near our dock. "It feels that way," she admitted. "Being back in an international business environment, making decisions that don't involve crisis management for a change. It's invigorating." "I remember that feeling well," I told her. "There's something about working across cultures that sharpens your perspective." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Mom, I've been meaning to ask you something. The firm is considering establishing a more permanent presence in Singapore. They've asked if I'd consider a 2-year assignment helping build the office." "That sounds like an incredible opportunity," I said carefully, aware of the implications for Tyler. "What are you thinking?" "I'm torn," she confessed. "Professionally, it's exactly what I need to rebuild my career after the Kevin disaster. The compensation would allow me to finally regain solid financial footing. But Tyler—" She trailed off, the conflict evident in her expression. "He needs stability," I finished for her. "Exactly. Another major upheaval so soon after everything with Kevin seems unfair to him. International schools in Singapore are excellent, but it's so far from everything familiar." I considered her dilemma thoughtfully. "What options have you considered?" "Turning it down is the obvious one, but that feels like surrendering a rare second chance. Taking Tyler with me would be disruptive for him, but might also be an amazing experience in the long run. And then—" "And then?" I prompted when she hesitated. "I've wondered about a third option," she said cautiously. "Whether Tyler might stay with you during the school year, at least for the first year while I get established. He'd have continuity with his current school, hockey team, friends. I'd come back for all holidays and breaks. You and he could visit Singapore during his summer vacation." The suggestion caught me completely by surprise. Not because it was unreasonable. Tyler and I had settled into a comfortable routine that clearly benefited us both, but because it represented a level of trust I hadn't expected Melissa to extend so soon. "That's a significant decision," I said carefully, "and a considerable responsibility. Have you discussed this idea with Tyler at all?" "Not yet. I wanted to explore whether you'd even consider it first." I took a moment to truly consider the proposition. At 62, I'd built a peaceful life structured around my own preferences and rhythms. Taking on primary caretaking responsibilities for an active child would fundamentally alter that carefully constructed independence. Yet, watching Tyler flourish during our summer together had brought unexpected joy, reconnecting me with aspects of myself that had been dormant for years. "I would consider it," I said finally. "But only if Tyler is genuinely comfortable with the arrangement, not just agreeing to please you. And we would need very clear parameters about decision-making authority, financial responsibilities, and how we handle any challenges that might arise." Relief washed over her face. "Of course. I wouldn't want it any other way." "Let's take some time to think about it," I suggested. "You discuss it with Tyler and really listen to his feelings. I'll consider what adjustments I'd need to make here. Then we can talk again next week." After the call ended, I walked down to the dock where Tyler was still engaged with the duck family, having named each member and created an elaborate backstory about their lives beneath the surface of the river. "Grandma, look! The babies are getting their real feathers now. They're growing up so fast." I sat beside him, watching the ducklings paddle efficiently behind their mother. "They certainly are. That's what living things do. They grow and change. Sometimes in surprising ways." He leaned against my side comfortably, a gesture that had become natural over our weeks together. "I like it here," he said simply. It's peaceful. Even for an energetic boy who loves hockey and video games? I teased gently. He nodded seriously. Even for me, it's a different kind of fun, like slower but deeper. His articulation of exactly what I valued about my riverside sanctuary struck me profoundly. Perhaps there was wisdom in considering Melissa's proposal, not just for her career rehabilitation or Tyler's stability, but for the unexpected bond that had formed between grandmother and grandson during this summer interlude. When the time came to discuss the Singapore possibility with Tyler, I made myself scarce, wanting Melissa to have a private conversation with her son without my influence. They walked along the river while I deliberately busied myself in the studio, respecting their need for space. When they returned, Tyler's expression was thoughtful but not distressed. Mom says she might go work in Singapore, he informed me as he helped prepare dinner that evening. For 2 whole years. That's what she's considering, I confirmed. How do you feel about that? He chopped carrots with careful concentration, a skill I'd taught him during our cooking lessons. I'd miss her a lot. But she says it's really important for her job, and I could either go with her or stay here with you for the school year. Both options have good things and challenging things about them, I acknowledged. Singapore would be an amazing adventure, a whole different culture, new friends, interesting experiences. But staying here would mean keeping your school, your hockey team, your friends. He nodded, continuing to line up carrot pieces in precise rows. If I stayed with you, would we still fish in the morning sometimes? And could I bring Watson? Watson was the elderly golden retriever Melissa had adopted from a rescue organization the previous year, a gentle soul who had provided tremendous emotional support to Tyler during the tumultuous period of Kevin's arrest and absence. Watson would be very welcome, I assured him. And yes, we could absolutely still fish, though during the school year, probably just on weekends. He seemed satisfied with this answer. Mom says she'd call every day and come back for all the holidays, and we could go visit her in Singapore for Christmas and summer vacation. That sounds like she's thought carefully about how to stay connected with you, even across the distance. Yeah. He paused his chopping, looking up at me with serious eyes. Grandma, would you be sad if I stayed with you? Would it mess up your life? The directness of his question touched me deeply. Tyler, having you here this summer has been one of the greatest joys of my life. If you stayed longer, some things would change. I'd need to adjust my schedule, make sure I was available for school events, that sort of thing. But those aren't sacrifices. They're just part of caring for someone important to me. He nodded, processing this answer with characteristic thoughtfulness. I think I want to stay here, he said finally. At least for this year. Singapore sounds cool, but I don't want to leave my team right when coach says I might make captain. And I really like fishing with you. But is that okay for Mom? Will she be lonely? Your mom will miss you terribly, I said honestly. But she also wants what's best for you. And sometimes adults have to make hard choices to build a better future, even when those choices involve temporary separation from people they love. Like you did when you moved away from Seattle? He asked, demonstrating once again his remarkable ability to connect concepts. Similar, yes, I agreed. Though in my case, the separation was because of conflict rather than opportunity. Your mom's situation is much more positive. She's moving towards something good, not away from something painful. He seemed to accept this distinction. I'll still miss her, he said quietly. Of course you will. And that's perfectly natural. Missing someone is just another way of loving them when they're not physically present. Over the next week, our three-way discussions about the Singapore opportunity evolved into concrete planning. Melissa accepted the position. We established a schedule for regular video calls that accommodated the time difference. and I began researching how to formally establish my legal guardianship during her absence. We'll need temporary guardianship. Papers, I explained during one of our planning sessions. Nothing that diminishes your parental rights, just documents that allow me to make day-to-day decisions regarding Tyler's education, healthcare, and activities. Rick can help with that? She asked, referring to my longtime attorney. He can recommend the right family law specialist, I confirmed. This needs to be handled properly to prevent any complications with school or medical care. She nodded, taking notes on her tablet. And finances? I'll continue covering Tyler's expenses, of course. School, activities, clothing, healthcare. That makes sense, I agreed. We can set up a dedicated account for those expenses for transparency. I'm happy to cover day-to-day costs like food and any additional activities we might discover he enjoys. Tyler, who had been listening to this exchange with apparent boredom, suddenly perked up. Like fishing equipment? Because I was thinking I might need a better rod if we're going to catch steelhead this fall. Melissa and I exchanged amused glances. We'll discuss fishing equipment separately, I told him with mock seriousness. That falls under the category of special negotiations. As our summer together drew to a close, and preparations for both Melissa's departure to Singapore and Tyler's more permanent stay with me accelerated, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected journey that had brought us to this point. The offshore accounts that had once symbolized my need for financial independence from my daughter's controlling behavior had evolved into something entirely different. The security that now allowed me to support both Melissa and Tyler through this next chapter of our family story. While Melissa finalized her international work details, I focused on preparing my home and life for Tyler's extended stay. The guest room became properly his, decorated with hockey posters and a special shelf for his growing collection of fishing lures. I connected with his school counselor to ensure a smooth transition, arranged carpools with several hockey parents, and even reluctantly learned to navigate various social media platforms to better understand his digital social life. Watson arrived a week before Melissa's departure, settling into our household with the philosophical acceptance unique to older dogs. He claimed a sunny spot on the deck overlooking the river, and quickly established a routine of gentle morning walks and afternoon naps that complemented our household rhythms perfectly. The night before Melissa's flight to Singapore, she stayed at the cottage, the three of us sharing a final dinner together before our family constellation would temporarily shift. Tyler was subdued, the reality of his mother's imminent departure, finally sinking in despite his general enthusiasm for staying with me. 2 years is a really long time, he said as we cleared the dinner dishes. It will go by faster than you think, Melissa assured him, though her own eyes reflected the difficulty of the coming separation. And remember, I'll be back for Thanksgiving, which is just a few months away. Later, after Tyler had gone to bed, Melissa and I sat on the deck with glasses of wine, the river silvered by moonlight before us. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. It's a tremendous responsibility I'm placing on you. I'm sure, I confirmed. What I'm less certain about is whether you're completely comfortable with it. This is a significant act of trust, given our history. She traced the rim of her wineglass thoughtfully. That's precisely why I'm at peace with the decision. After everything, my misguided attempt to control your finances, Kevin's betrayal, the legal nightmare, I've gained a much deeper understanding of trust and independence. You trusted me enough to allow me back into your life after I violated your autonomy. I trust you enough to care for my son while I rebuild my career. That's quite an evolution, I observed. For both of us, she agreed. A year ago, I would never have considered an international assignment that separated me from Tyler, no matter how beneficial professionally. I would have sacrificed that opportunity out of fear and guilt. And now? Now I understand that sometimes the best parenting decision is modeling courage and resilience rather than perpetual presence. Tyler will learn more from seeing me rebuild my career with integrity than he would from watching me shrink my life out of anxiety about leaving him. Her words resonated deeply with my own life philosophy, one I had practiced but never fully articulated to her until our relationship ruptured and reformed. "You know," I said carefully, "those offshore accounts you were so curious about, they were never really about the money itself." She looked up, interest sparked in her expression. "They represented something more fundamental, the right to self-determination. Financial independence was simply the practical foundation that supported that right. What I protected wasn't wealth, it was autonomy." "I understand that now," she said softly. "And I hope to build something similar for myself through this Singapore opportunity, not hidden accounts, but genuine financial resilience that can't be undermined by someone else's poor decisions." "That's a worthy goal," I affirmed, "and one I fully support." We sat in companionable silence for a while, the gentle lapping of the river against the dock creating a soothing backdrop to our thoughts. "Mom," Melissa said eventually, "I never asked if you have regrets about leaving Seattle so abruptly, about the months of separation, about any of it." I considered the question thoughtfully. "Regrets? No. Sadness about the circumstances that made it necessary? Certainly. But the distance created space for both of us to evolve in ways that might not have been possible otherwise. Into who we were always meant to be," she suggested. "Perhaps. Or simply into more authentic versions of ourselves, less constrained by expectations and patterns that no longer served us." The next morning brought the inevitable tears as Melissa said goodbye to Tyler, promising frequent video calls and sending detailed instructions for downloading the international messaging apps that would keep them connected across continents. I maintained a supportive presence, neither minimizing their emotional parting nor amplifying the drama of temporary separation. As we waved goodbye to her taxi, Tyler's hand firmly in mine, I felt the weight of responsibility settle around my shoulders, not as a burden, but as a mantle willingly accepted. This role of guardian and grandmother was not one I had anticipated when I fled Seattle seeking independence, yet it felt surprisingly right. "What should we do first?" I asked Tyler as the taxi disappeared around the bend in the road. He considered the question seriously, wiping the last traces of tears from his cheeks. "Could we take Watson for a walk by the river? And maybe check if the fishing is good this afternoon?" "That sounds perfect," I agreed, squeezing his hand gently. As we walked down toward the water, Watson ambling contentedly beside us, I reflected on the profound irony of my situation. The offshore accounts that had represented my escape from family entanglements had ultimately enabled a deeper, healthier form of family connection, one based on mutual respect rather than control or obligation. The accounts remained my private security, a foundation of independence that allowed me to engage with Melissa and Tyler from a position of choice rather than necessity. But their true value had evolved beyond financial protection. They now represented wisdom passed through generations, from me to Melissa, who was building her own security in Singapore, and eventually to Tyler, who was already absorbing lessons about self-sufficiency through our morning fishing rituals and careful financial discussions. "Grandma," Tyler said, interrupting my reverie, "do you think when I grow up, I could be an international businessman like you and Mom, working in different countries and stuff?" "You could be anything you set your mind to," I told him honestly. "But the most important thing isn't what career you choose. It's building a life that feels authentic to who you truly are." He nodded solemnly, processing this advice with characteristic thoughtfulness. "I think I'd like that. Being authentic, I mean." "You're already well on your way," I assured him, watching as he ran ahead to throw a stick for Watson, his natural resilience asserting itself after the emotional morning. The river flowed steadily before us, its current a reminder that life rarely proceeds in straight lines. It curves and bends, sometimes forcing us to navigate unexpected obstacles, other times carrying us to destinations we never imagined possible. The offshore accounts had been my personal lifeline when the current threatened to overwhelm me. Now they formed the bedrock of a new chapter, one where financial security enabled generational healing rather than protective isolation. As Tyler and Watson splashed at the river's edge, their joy evident in every movement, I silently thanked my younger self for the foresight that had created this possibility. The accounts my daughter had never found had protected more than my assets. They had preserved my ability to choose this moment, this responsibility, this unexpected joy of family reconfigured and relationships renewed through wisdom rather than wounded pride. 5 years passed in a rhythm I could never have imagined when I first fled to Portland seeking independence. Tyler grew from a thoughtful 9-year-old into a lanky teenager whose voice now cracked unpredictably when he talked about hockey statistics or fishing techniques. Melissa's temporary assignment in Singapore had evolved into a permanent position as regional director, her career flourishing beyond even her ambitious expectations. And I, at 67, had found an unexpected balance between autonomy and connection that enriched my life immeasurably. We created our own unique family pattern. Tyler lived with me during the school year, thriving academically and becoming a standout on his hockey team. Melissa returned for every major holiday and school break, our cottage expanding to accommodate her visits with ease and warmth. Summer and winter vacations found Tyler and me in Singapore, exploring the vibrant city-state through Melissa's experienced eyes, delighting in her obvious professional confidence and the respect she commanded from colleagues. Through it all, my offshore accounts remained my private foundation. Still carefully maintained, still properly reported to tax authorities, still unknown in their specifics to Melissa or anyone else. But their purpose had subtly shifted. Where, once they represented escape, now they embodied legacy, financial wisdom I was gradually sharing with Tyler through age-appropriate lessons and practical experiences. "Grandma, is it really necessary to track every single expense?" he asked one evening, looking up from the budgeting app I'd encouraged him to use for his allowance and hockey earnings from refereeing younger kids' games. "Not every penny," I conceded, "but understanding where your money goes is the first step toward controlling where it takes you." He sighed dramatically, the teenage response to all adult wisdom, but continued inputting his data. "Mom says you're the most financially savvy person she knows, that you taught her everything she uses in her job now." I smiled at this characterization, so different from the woman who had once questioned my competence. "Your mother is being generous. She's built her expertise through her own hard work and intelligence. But she also says she had to learn the hard way through what happened with Dad." I chose my response carefully, mindful of the complex legacy Kevin's actions had left in our family. Sometimes difficult experiences teach us the most powerful lessons. Your mother transformed a painful situation into valuable wisdom. That's a rare strength. He nodded, processing this with the thoughtfulness that remained his hallmark despite adolescent hormones. "Is that why you keep teaching me about money? So I don't have to learn those lessons the hard way?" "Exactly," I confirmed. Financial literacy is a form of freedom. The earlier you understand it, the more options you'll have throughout your life. Our conversation was interrupted by the chime of an incoming video call, Melissa checking in from Singapore, where it was already. The next morning, Tyler eagerly accepted the call, his face lighting up at the sight of his mother on the screen. "Mom, guess what? Coach says I'll definitely be starting in the championship game next week. Grandma already bought plane tickets for you to come. Watch." Melissa's smile matched her son's enthusiasm. "I wouldn't miss it for anything. My meetings are all rescheduled, and I'll be there Wednesday night." Their conversation flowed with the easy intimacy they'd maintained despite geographical separation. Tyler updating her on school projects and hockey statistics, Melissa sharing tales of her latest business trip to Tokyo. I moved about the kitchen, preparing dinner, content to be the background presence in their mother-son connection. Later, after Tyler had gone upstairs to finish homework, Melissa asked to speak with me privately. "Mom, I've been meaning to discuss something with you," she began, her expression turning serious. "The firm is considering opening a West Coast office to better serve our American clients. They've asked if I'd be interested in heading it up." "Back in the States?" I clarified, surprise evident in my voice. "Where would they locate it?" "That's still being decided," she admitted. "Seattle is an obvious option given the Pacific Rim connections, but Portland is also on the short list. And that's partly why I wanted to discuss it with you." I understood immediately the implications of her potential return. "You're concerned about disrupting Tyler's life again, and perhaps about our current arrangement." She nodded, relief evident that I'd grasped the complexity without extensive explanation. "He's thrived living with you these past 5 years. His school, his hockey, his friends, all centered around Portland now. Moving him back under my roof, after so long." She trailed off, the concern evident in her expression even through the digital connection. "Would be a significant adjustment," I finished for her. "For all of us." "Exactly. I'm not even sure he'd want to live with me full-time anymore. Isn't that strange? To worry that your own child might prefer living with his grandmother?" "Not strange at all," I assured her. "We've created a stable, comfortable life here. Teenagers generally resist major changes to their routines. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love and need you just as much as ever." She smiled gratefully at my understanding. "The Portland option is looking increasingly attractive, for obvious reasons. Being near both of you while still advancing my career seems like the perfect solution." "Have you discussed this possibility with Tyler yet?" "Not directly. I wanted to talk with you first, to see how you felt about potential changes to our arrangement." I appreciated her consideration, so different from the woman who had once made decisions about my life without consultation. "I think we should discuss it together when you're here for his championship game. All 3 of us, openly and honestly." She agreed, and we spent the remainder of the call discussing logistical details of her upcoming visit. After we disconnected, I sat on the deck watching the river flow past, contemplating how dramatically our family dynamics had evolved. The daughter who had once attempted to control my finances now carefully consulted me before making decisions that might impact our shared lives. The grandson who had once been the occasional visitor was now the center of my daily routine. And I, who had fled to Portland seeking independence, had found deeper fulfillment in this interdependent arrangement than I could have imagined possible. The championship game arrived with all the drama worthy of teenage athletics. Tyler's team won in overtime, his assist on the winning goal sending the crowd into wild celebration. Melissa and I hugged each other spontaneously, our shared pride momentarily eclipsing any awkwardness about the upcoming conversation regarding her potential return. Later that evening, after the team celebration dinner, we gathered in the living room of my cottage, now our cottage in many ways, filled with Tyler's trophies and school projects alongside my paintings and books. I made hot chocolate, a tradition, that had survived Tyler's transition from child to teenager, and we settled into the comfortable familiarity of family conversation. "I have some news to share with both of you," Melissa began, setting her mug carefully on a coaster. "The firm is considering opening a new office in the U.S., and they've asked if I'd be interested in running it." Tyler's expression brightened immediately. "In Portland? You'd move back here?" "Possibly," she said cautiously. "Portland is one option they're considering. Seattle is another." His enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "But if it was Seattle, we'd have to move there, right? Away from here?" The "we" in his question revealed his assumption that her return would automatically reconstitute their household in its original form. Mother and son living together, grandmother a separate entity. Melissa glanced at me, seeking guidance on how to navigate this delicate territory. "Actually," I interjected gently, "that's something the 3 of us should discuss together. There are several possibilities to consider." Tyler looked between us teenage perceptiveness cutting through adult diplomatic language. You mean whether I'd live with Mom again or keep living here with you? Essentially, yes, Melissa confirmed. You're 14 now, old enough to have a voice in these decisions. Your life is established here. School, hockey, friends. Moving to Seattle would mean starting over in many ways. But if you moved to Portland, I could live with you but still keep everything the same, right? His question revealed the complex emotions beneath the surface, the natural desire to reconnect with his mother balanced against teenage resistance to change. That's one option, she agreed. Or we could find a middle ground. Perhaps you'd split time between both households. Or we might find a place near here to maintain your school and activities while creating a new family home. I watched this exchange with quiet pride in both of them. Melissa for approaching the situation with such thoughtful consideration. Tyler for engaging maturely with a complex family decision. What about you, Grandma? Tyler turned to me, concern evident in his expression. Would you be lonely if I moved out? The question touched me deeply. I would certainly miss our daily conversations and routines, I acknowledged honestly. But I would never want that to prevent you from rebuilding your primary household with your mother. Family evolves, Tyler. The relationships remain strong, even when the living arrangements change. Could we still fish on weekends? And would you still come to my games? Wild horses couldn't keep me away, I assured him with a smile. The conversation continued late into the evening, exploring various living arrangements and their practical implications. No final decisions were made. Melissa's transfer wasn't yet confirmed, and location details remained pending. But the open, respectful discussion itself represented a triumph of family communication that would have been unimaginable 6 years earlier when I fled Seattle in self-protection. After Tyler went to bed, Melissa and I sat together on the deck, watching moonlight shimmer across the river's surface. The spring air carried the scent of flowering trees and the gentle sounds of water lapping against the dock. I never thought we'd be here, she said quietly. Not just physically in Portland, but here, able to discuss complex family decisions openly without manipulation or hidden agendas. We've both grown, I acknowledged. You into a confident professional who balances career ambition with thoughtful parenting, me into someone who can maintain independence without requiring isolation. Those offshore accounts, she said with a small smile. The ones that so concerned us years ago. They really were never about hiding money, were they? They were about creating options, I replied. The freedom to make choices based on preference rather than necessity. Financial independence as a foundation for authentic relationships. She nodded, understanding evident in her expression. That's what I've built in Singapore. Not offshore accounts specifically, but financial security that belongs to me alone. Not tied to a husband's decisions or vulnerable to someone else's mistakes. The most valuable legacy I could have hoped to pass to you, I said softly. And when I hope we're both passing to Tyler, she added, not just the practical skills of budgeting and investing, but the deeper wisdom that financial security creates freedom of choice, and that true relationships thrive on mutual respect rather than control or dependence. We sat in comfortable silence, the conversation complete without being conclusively resolved, much like our evolving family structure itself. The offshore accounts that had once symbolized secrets and separation had transformed into metaphorical touchstones for a healthier approach to both finances and relationships. Whatever decision Melissa ultimately made about her career relocation, whatever living arrangement we established for Tyler, the foundation remained solid. 3 individuals, choosing connection rather than surrendering autonomy, supporting each other's growth without sacrificing personal boundaries. The daughter who had never found my offshore accounts had discovered something far more valuable. The principles of independence and mutual respect that would carry our family forward through whatever changes the future might bring. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.